Thank you, David Sedgwick. And here's the infamous laughter coming up, right? There it is. That's Paul Chris laughing in the background when we made that recording at the United Methodist Church here in Crescent City with David Sedgwick. Hey, greetings, everyone. You're tuned into the Royal Radio Receptors of KFUG on 101.1 FM in the cosmos of coastal Crescent City, California. Welcome to Jacques Talks. I'm Jacques Kepner, and your host for this week's hour-long live show that features candid conversations with a rich variety of local, interesting folks that call our magical seaside kingdom home. If you are hearing the show either live, streaming, or rebroadcasting, count yourself lucky and fortunate that you have such a great local, I call it a down-home community radio station like KFUG, serving you unique programs and music 24/7. And it's just not about listening. It's getting involved with your local voice. I implore you, please, volunteer, contribute, donate your time and money to a cool, non-profit, non-commercial radio station like KFUG, or Fugland as we affectionately call it. Find out more by going to kfugradio.org. Lastly, if you are a talented and interesting character or know someone that is, please share them and yourself with me by reaching out to me, and we may get you in the KFUG studios sitting right across from me here. Best way to get me is find and friend me on Facebook. It is Jacques, the French spelling of Jack, Kepner, K-E-P as in Paul, N-E-R. Now, speaking of characters, I'm joined in the studio today by, number one, a new friend. Let's see, Doc, Gigi and I met this guest, I want to say, nearly 10 months ago, 9-10 months, just under a year, because I've been here, and I think I met him shortly after. He is a very nice guy, a very affable guy, conversant guy, well-traveled guy. We're going to find out a lot more about this person, but he also has a very interesting job. He does something that is, to me, is fascinating. He knows things about the psychological behavior that all human beings exhibit, and how to deal with those people. Without any further ado, I want to introduce David Garcia. Hey, David, what's up, brother?
Hey, how's it going? Thank you for having me.
Good. How many times have you been on the radio?
No, this is my first time other than being the ninth caller a couple times at 91X in San Diego.
Okay, there you got it first. Well, you sure relaxed. I should have asked you that earlier because you're super relaxed. We are just having a conversation here. Yeah. And I am excited about having you in here. But before we get to the intrigue and the thriller part of what you do, let's follow a chronological order of past, present, and future. So, okay. So David, you've been here 3 years. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Carlsbad, San Diego. It's a North County, San Diego, California.
Okay, a little bit closer.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, very typical Southern California life. I had a surf team in my high school, so I was an avid surfer skater. Very typical San Diego high school kid. That's where I grew up, and I graduated Carlsbad High in 1990.
Well, okay, and I see on Facebook, we're friends, and you're posting, you're an excellent photographer. You are out there catching some pretty unique pictures. You surfer, you travel a lot, so it's very interesting. How long have you been in Crescent City?
It'll be 3 years this July, so relative newcomer.
Relatively newcomer, yeah. You and I share that same affiliation here. What is your favorite thing about this beautiful coastal area that we live in?
Yeah, well, being a surfer, you can't complain about having uncrowded, clean water. Lots of wildlife all around. Yeah. It's not unheard of to see sea lions, maybe a whale going by. I've even seen a bald eagle coming by with a fish in its talons.
Whoa.
And then you go and you change out your wetsuit and say, hey, there's a porcupine over there. Yeah, so, being a surfer, I really love it. And I got my graduate degree in management, so it could help accelerate my career and give me more competitive advantage to reach new at levels of employment in my career with TSA. But then I enhanced that degree with natural resource management certification. So being around here, there's plenty of opportunity for me to observe the case studies of natural resource management, where we have human development and activity in trying to maintain a sustainable environment and be be sensitive to potential degradation of ecology and habitat and so on. So
Yeah,
there's a lot
yeah.
going on in this area in that regard.
You
and it
gave
keeps me
somewhat
interested.
away. You did quickly mention TSA, which is your job, your career, but we'll get to that in
Okay.
just a few minutes. Let's climb up the backside of your past a little bit more here. When you were younger, you traveled quite a bit. Tell us where you traveled.
Having grown up in San Diego, I had access just across the border to another country.
Yeah.
And so going over there, and there's a different language, different food, different culture. And so the culture shock, I wasn't really susceptible to that because being experienced to foreign things was something I had exposure to at a pretty young age. We still go there quite a bit, go surfing in Baja California, go party down in Tijuana. And so I got the travel bug fairly early on, and I wasn't afraid to experience foreign and interesting locales and people. And I realized that wherever you go, people are generally kind, generous, happy, and just want to live normal lives, even if you don't understand their language or their culture very well.
Right on.
And growing up in San Diego in the 80s, I'm looking around here, you got a Cure poster, Led Zeppelin.
Yeah, we got lots of
Yeah.
posters in the K-Fug studio.
The alternative radio, a lot of the bands were British bands, so I became somewhat of an Anglophile pretty early on. And so when I went to college, I remember walking down the hall one day, and there was an invitation to join an exchange program
Yeah.
to study in London, England. So
Wow.
I took up that offer, and then the travel bug was firmly.
So you spent
integrated.
some of your college years in England.
Yes, 2 semesters.
2 semesters in London. What a great time. You were 18, 19, 20 years old.
I was in
somewhere?
my early 20s. It was
Yeah.
a great time to be there. It was
There
in
you
the
go.
mid-90s.
Cool. That is good. I share. I want to go back. Have you been back since?
Oh, yeah,
Oh,
many times. Yeah.
You still like it?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
It changes. London, the city, it's very multicultural, metropolitan. And you see it evolve, but I love England. I always find an opportunity to go there, but there's so many places to go. I don't want to repeat the same excursion too many times.
Yeah. Okay. Well, here, traveled. You've seen it. You've been around. It reflects. I think I sent you that quote by Muhammad that I love so much, and Muhammad wrote, quote, "Do not tell me how educated you are. ... Rather, show me a map of your travels." End quote. I love that.
I love it too.
Because it kind of puts it all together. We don't need to have how sophisticated you are, what you've been, but where you have traveled. Show me a map. All right, let's move on to your kind of present and what you've been doing for the past nearly 22 years, I think you are, and that is your career. Tell us a little bit about your, quote, career for the past 22 years, is it?
We rolled out Medford, Oregon with the TSA in 2002.
Okay, what does TSA stand for?
Transportation Security Administration.
There we go. And it's part of the Homeland,
It is under the umbrella of the Department of Homeland Security
and it's been around since,
since 2001, after the events of 9/11.
I think it was mid-November, 2 months after.
Very
Right,
quickly.
It was founded quickly.
Yeah.
And you've been there almost that entire time, minus a few years. Have you seen a complete restructuring of TSA in your time you've been there? Is it pretty much still focused on just one thing only, and that is securing our airways or waterways or railways?
Yeah, it's always been multimodal, surface, rail, water, air. The mission statement has never changed. Our vision statement has changed with the times. And being a brand new agency in 2001, you can imagine what it, especially with the urgency after having experienced that terrorist attack in 9/11,
Sure.
it had to be stood up really quick with standard operating procedures that had to be designed and rolled out. And so you can imagine it was a little chaotic at first, especially going over and federalizing airports and taking over for the security that they already had there, standardizing it to the TSA, and those standards were in the process of being implemented. And
Right.
so growing pains, I would say, more than change, ironing out wrinkles, and always adapting and evolving to emerging threats, obviously.
Do you want to make any disclaimer at this point? I mean, again, you represent David Garcia
Yeah.
as my friend. You're here on the studio. We're talking about a whole plethora of ideas and subjects. But because you're with the TSA, that's a big government entity.
It is. It's one of the biggest.
So you're not speaking for them, but you can speak of your kind of your general impressions or experiences with them, right?
Yeah, I'm not the voice of TSA, and I think if I attempted to be, I would have to have a pre-approved speech or presentation, and that would sort of diminish, quite sadly, the organic nature of the conversation we have in
right
here.
on.
And you can imagine, like any large organization, you want to have a consistent standard voiced by designated and authorized
Yes.
individuals. So, and having moved to Crescent City, I've moved into a position where I'm not even privy to the conversations about the future and current goals at that level anyway, to be able to speak as the representative of TSA to the media. In addition, there's over 50,000 uniformed TSOs out there, and you can imagine if each one attempted to speak through their lens. It's something that you need to manage strategically.
Yeah, we're just talking in general things that affect us in this community, because you do work at the not the hospital. You do work at the TSA office, which is right near the airport. Inside the airport at the Crest City has an airport.
That's right, a nice little airport. I love it.
It is a nice little airport, isn't it?
Absolutely.
What are your hours, man? Are you getting up because that flight leaves early? The I'm trying to think of Concordia the Conair. The Conair flight leaves early in the morning.
Yeah, Contour.
I knew that. I was just testing you.
Yeah, I like that movie. Well, TSA's interesting as an agency because, we got this new airline coming in. Who knows what their flight schedule is going to be? So it's important for us to...
Very erratic.
You never know. We have to maintain good partnerships with the airlines and the airports and all of our internal, external stakeholders, because we devise our schedule along what the airline decides theirs is going to be.
Right.
So currently it leaves at 7 o'clock, and on some days during the summer we have another one that leaves at 2. So I worked with an 8-hour shift. I can cover both those flights.
Gotcha. So you get up pretty early, though.
Oh, yeah.
Got to be there, and then you leave hours after it's left.
On days when we don't have a second flight, yes, we
Right.
do training. I do patrols as a visible deterrent in the airport to sort of help their security posture.
I've gone and filled up the water bottles at that water bottle fill-up station a couple times, because during the summer when we had terrible water from the well, I would go in there occasionally. Shh, don't tell anybody.
I'll keep that in mind. It's a public building. You're allowed.
Yeah, there it is. Isn't the TSA one of the newest branches of our federal government?
It is one of the newest ones. There are newer ones. We have Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency that just rolled out, and we have one that has to do with health research that's rolled out. And there are agencies, depending on the administration, that roll out from time to time. But TSA is the most public-facing agency. So as far as the big ones, we are still relatively young, not really in our infancy at this point. It's it's over 20 years. We are one of the newer ones as far as the big players.
Cool. And you have been here for about 3 years in that capacity of TSA, working with the TSA here, and you came from Medford.
Yes, I was the Assistant Federal Security Director at Medford. So my boss was up in Portland, and I ran the Southern Oregon airports for TSA. And when I rolled out, I was a uniformed TSO like everyone else, and got promoted to that point, having moved around and sort of paid my dues. And I saw an opportunity to move down here and fulfill my desire to eventually retire, and sort of accelerated that pace when the position came open.
So years in Medford with TSA.
I moved in Medford. I moved to Medford in 1997. Loved that town, loved the region.
Right.
I was able to drive down here and surf. Sometimes I'd get off work, come down, surf a sunset session, drive back.
Wow.
And that was my home base for a lot of years. That's where I had my home. And in the meantime, I went off to Dallas to get involved with a behavior detection analysis program. I went and ran Seattle in senior management, went back to Portland, paid my dues, and then saw the opportunity to take over the Medford airport in approximately 2016 and came back. And so I rolled out in 2002 and came down to Crescent City a few years ago to work at our airport here.
I will say we're going to get to that intrigue part, the thrilling part that I see, and that is some of the stuff you are a super specialist in. You've seen so many things in your 20 plus years of working with the TSA. Let's get some of the weird things out of the way. Other than airports, where are agents and officers assigned? Do you call yourselves agents, a TSA agent or an officer?
Our official title has the word officer in it.
Okay.
We have regulatory inspectors that are involved with regulating all modes of transportation. We're global. Any global airport that wants to have a destination that arrives in the United States has to conform to TSA regulations, so we have regulatory arm all around the globe. And we are multimodal, so we have surface inspectors, we have rail inspectors, we have cargo inspectors, we have the Federal Air Marshal Service.
Oh, yeah.
We have federal flight deck officers.
So is a Sky Marshal part of the TSA?
Yeah, they're called the Federal Air Marshal, or commonly known as the Sky Marshal.
And they are gun-carrying secret shoppers sitting in a seat.
Yeah.
You don't know when, where. Do you even know, or they tip you off? Do you kind of look at a guy or a gal that walks in and They wink at you, a special wink, give you a special handshake, and say,
I would only know if I was working at a checkpoint and I needed to process them through. They don't come through like normal people, because they're armed. So if I needed to,
yeah, they would kind of be, hey, use the back door over
right.
there. Bring in the side door, right?
So your average person isn't supposed to know who the federal air marshal is.
Yeah, right, which we never know. There could be, I know I believe I read an article that they were really heavily used in the early years after 2001, 9/11, and then they've slowly been but they're still out there.
They are still out there. The agency has changed. Their priorities have sort of changed because they started to see that there was a lot of burnout when you get trained for an event that just never occurs. And, you get burnout flying around nonstop and not seeing your family as much as you'd like. So they got a different sort of priorities with the utilization of that resource at this point.
Okay, so here's another semi-trivial one, but I got to ask it. Do you get to fly at a discounted rate, just like all those other people that work in the airline industry?
Yeah, that's a good question. The truth is I'm not allowed to accept any gifts from contractors, stakeholders, general public. And it's seen its potential conflict of interest. They don't want any officer even tempted to sort of, grease palms and relax our security standards. So I can't accept any kind of discounts. I can't even accept a buddy pass from an airline employee unless they're my immediate family member or spouse, or I can demonstrate and prove that I have a long-term, deep relationship with them. Some of the perks, I do get pre-check. I'm not sure I would call that a fringe benefit because I'm actually doing TSA a favor by flying as pre-check, because then they can devote resources to other maybe unknown or higher risk individuals. And if I have paid parking at an airport that I work at, that helps.
Okay, define this pre-check. Everybody says, oh, it's just a way, just pay your money and you're going to get in free.
Yeah.
Quicker. I say quicker, not free.
Not for free, but that's the idea, is to be more efficient. Not quicker, because we have to adhere to security standards and we don't rush, we maintain focus. But less resources are going to be applied to people who have demonstrated a lower risk profile by offering information in advance. TSA is a risk-based security agency. In other words, it's predicated on the notion you have limited resources. And so you assign risk and you devote resources accordingly, so you're not wasting resources on low-risk individuals or endeavors and able to focus on higher risk. So if somebody is on like a no-fly list, that would be considered a higher risk. They get more processes and time. If somebody is on the no-fly list, then they're not able to fly. But people that are on lists that, like secure databases that warrant further scrutiny and resources, then they get it as higher risk, and that frees up resources. Pre-check would free up resources that could be allocated.
Okay, now pre-check, you're still going through a vetting out. They're still checking you out. So Jacques Kepner comes in and says, I'm on pre-check, here's my 100 and whatever it costs. And I sent it in. Are they doing a background check on me?
They are doing a background check, and that's the idea, because the majority of the population, 99 whatever percent of the population is either known or known low risk, but you have to find the high risk.
99% of our population is low risk,
leaving room for the high risk terrorist or other nefarious actor. With pre-check, you're offering some little information in advance, so you're not unknown. Now you're a bona fide low risk, so not as many procedures need to be allocated to you. Just enough.
I always say it's like the Lexus lanes on the freeways in the Bay Area down San Francisco. It's like I go to the airport and it's like pre-check. There's nobody in line. Everybody else is lined up in a little, they're little back and forth around at least in the larger airports.
Yeah, but you'd be surprised. That's not always the case. TSA wants as many people to sign up for pre-check as possible because it just makes everything more efficient. Not necessarily, like I said, faster, but we're able to focus resources in other places. And sometimes so many people sign up for pre-check that their pre-check lanes all of a sudden become, depending on the time of day, we got a lot of business travelers, potentially even longer than the standard lanes.
I must be traveling on off times. Okay, some of the stranger things you've seen before we get to the psychological thriller parts of our conversation is are veterans making up the majority of TSA agents or officers?
Yeah, it would make sense that veterans are attracted to TSA because they're serving in uniform in one capacity for the federal government, and they can just go ahead and continue to serve with TSA in uniform and the American people and the federal government. And so we do get a lot of applicants, and in addition, you get a veteran's preference when getting hired. They are not the majority. In fact, last I checked, it's about 20% of our TSA employees are veterans.
Okay. And most of these officers are working at airports, right?
Yes.
That's the number one thing.
Absolutely.
But I'm not going to find a TSA at you can find them on the rail occasionally. If you do Amtrak and that stuff, you'll see occasionally, but never on a cruise ship, right?
I can't say never. It may have happened in the past, but no, it doesn't represent the threat to transportation because they're a point-to-point sort of luxury vacation sort of endeavor. If it threatened the free movement of people and commerce in the global transportation sector, then we may consider putting more focus on cruise ships. But we can trust that they can provide their own security to make sure that their company is viable and profitable.
Are there more men TSA agents or officers than women?
I think security tends to attract more men in general, just like the military. However, to serve the general population and the traveling public, which is basically 50-50, we have to maintain both male and female employees at all times. We sometimes struggle to find females. There are rare instances where the females just happen to outnumber the males, but for the most part, it tends to be mostly men. And here in Crescent City, we're always looking for females.
You got to have a stellar white, lily white background to become an officer. You can't have been convicted of any moral turpitude crimes or anything like that in the past. You've got to be pretty much a straight-laced person.
There are the severity of crimes that will automatically disqualify you. If there were some crimes that maybe were committed in the past that you can speak to and you fully disclose, that's not a showstopper.
Yeah,
so,
I stole that pack of gum.
Right. So
sorry. Bicycle chain.
We realize that not everybody is squeaky clean, but still can be an excellent and dedicated employee. So.
Yeah, cool. Is the TSA always looking for new recruits?
Yes, we recently had a pretty significant pay initiative so we can be more competitive in the larger metropolitan areas and be standard pay equivalent to what the other federal agencies, which was long overdue. And at the time, it was very difficult for us to hire and retain, and all the costs associated with hiring and the training became untenable with regard to our budget. So we had to do something to attract and keep employees. So we got a pay increase pretty much across the board.
Cool.
And so it has become less a problem hiring and retaining, but it still is.
Yeah. What type of training is involved? So I'm a new recruit. What am I going to expect to? What am I going to have to be doing the first month, 2 months, 3 months, whatever it takes?
Yeah. Well, like I said, it's expensive to train somebody. So
on-site training. So basically, yeah.
Yeah, it's on the job. I mean, we do some classroom training as well, but we want to make sure that people who think they might be a good fit for TSA have the opportunity to discover if they really are. So the training comes in phases. When people come on, they get just very basic training on how to deliver some rudimentary countermeasures, and if they make it through that and they decide they want to keep going, then as time passes, they're offered additional training to boost their competency and qualification and certification to take on more and more tasks.
You go into classes that are you're putting together classes, or maybe someone that's working here which is a small staffed right here in Crescent City. You know, tell me how many agents or officers you have, but are they going to go over to Medford to get more training occasionally, and courses offered?
Well, training is absolutely necessary. In fact, when TSA rolled out, Congress mandated a pretty significant amount of training. So even though the flight goes on, we still have downtime where we have to focus on doing quite a lot of training. So we don't necessarily have to go to Medford because these days a lot of it can be delivered online and it's recurrent. But TSA does have a very robust training department, and larger airports will have actual on-site personnel running training nonstop.
Okay, what are some of the skill sets that are needed to be a good officer or agent, other than standing up a lot, right?
Yes. Well, that brings to mind the organizational values, which are integrity, commitment, and respect. Integrity, not so much like you're trusted to say something that's true. Being accountable, being reliable, consistent, dependable. If you do something wrong, that you're accountable to it. You got to be committed to the mission because it requires laser focus and respect for the general public, who's our biggest stakeholder, and respect for the Constitution and the laws. Respect for our partners. In addition to that, I'd say professionalism. We are wearing the insignia of a federal agency and represent the federal government to the taxpayers and the traveling public. And hard work. I would say mostly team spirit, because we have a very, very diverse cadre of transportation security officers across the nation, and you all have to work together, and ideally as a well-oiled machine, because that efficiency imperative comes to play. And so teamwork is absolutely imperative. So if you enjoy working interdependently with other people, you might be a good
Kind of
fit for
have to
TSA.
be in the hospitality business in a way too. You got to wear a smile. I've had great experiences with TSA officers
Glad to hear
from the very beginning. I mean, they had a job to do. I've always found them, thorough, but usually pretty nice. I've tried to smuggle on my turtles a couple of times, and they caught me, but they let me have them and take them on anyways. Interesting. So integrity, commitment, respect. I have never seen, or have I don't know if I've seen a TSA, and I fly a lot. I've never seen a TSA carrying a gun. Is there, you guys gun toting or not?
No. And there's good reasons for that, but no, you will not see an armed TSA officer. And if you do, they would be plain clothes, and you wouldn't recognize them anyway. Interesting. Unless you knew that that's what their job was.
Yeah. Okay. And we'll leave it at that. Big question here. Most important question of the day, folks. Why are bottles of shampoo allowed? Yeah. Damn it.
Yeah. Well, they're allowed in your check bag, but they're disallowed in a carry-on. And the reason why, we are an intel-driven, agile agency. So as we get information, sometimes we have to react to it, but sometimes we get information that something's going down and there's a new emerging threat that we have to address. In 2006, there was a plot that was foiled out of the United Kingdom where it was actually an insider plot. Some individuals that were working for British Airways were planning to take liquid explosives and detonate them on the transatlantic flight somewhere over Chicago and another place. Good intel and law enforcement work foiled that plot, but all of a sudden, liquid explosives became a threat that we had to contend with. And so right about that time, the liquid prohibition came out, other than, the proper size limitations and amounts.
I can't bring a big bottle of shampoo unless it's on my check baggage.
You can bring in your check baggage.
Okay, so for Chris and Shari, who flew out of Crescent City about 5 months ago, and they visited us here, flew down to Oakland, they confiscated their THC hemp-infused shampoo that they'd paid a lot of money for.
I think I remember that.
And it was like, I was like, oh, man. You should have said, dude, you should have. Oh, no, they only had carry-on. So they couldn't put it anywhere else. And I said, why don't you call me? I had to run down there.
Yeah. Well, see, that's an option. And since it's an option, I like to reframe confiscated, because if somebody does get caught with an oversized liquid, okay, fair warning, this is prohibited. You have options. You can deal with it. You can take it outside and put it in your car, give it to Jacques, maybe check your bag. Yeah. If you decide you don't have time to do any of that and you just want to abandon it there, we'll provide the service of disposing it for you. But technically, we don't confiscate.
Okay, so confiscation is kind of about same thing with drinking water, right? I can't have my bottle of drinking water until if it's a regular, crystal geyser, until I drink it, and then I could refill it up once I've passed the TSA station. Yeah.
It's just a matter of efficiency. I mean, we could do an explosive test on every single bottle of water, but you can imagine that's it's not tenable. Okay. And so, you just can't bring any liquid. And I've actually had people say, this isn't a liquid, this is water, which is pretty funny. Yeah, you can't bring any liquid that's over 3.4 ounces in a carry-on.
And so you can't bring these things. What is another thing that's routinely confiscated, retained? So any bottles of liquid?
Yes, bottles of liquid is probably the most common. And, keychain, those little keychain pocket knives?
Yeah.
Everyone carries their keys, and people, they hardly ever use those things, and they forget they have them.
Yeah.
And so it's like, oops, yeah.
Hey, if you're looking for some keychains with knives.
Yeah, it's kind of a bummer sometimes, because a lot of those, well, not a lot of them, but, there's a significant percentage where people have sentimental value. It was like it was their father's pocket knife.
When you walk through, before you walk into that room where the TSA is located and operating at the Crescent City Airport, you have a big like a bulletin board out in front saying these things are not allowed, and you have things glued or tacked to that board saying don't bring barbed wire, don't bring, I forgot, knives, of course, anything like that. That pretty much lays it out what you are allowed and what you're not allowed. I've always wondered, I can't bring my water, but nowadays you could bring a lighter, a Bic lighter. Mm-hmm. And why is that? Just because Bic lighter is...
Well, a lot of people have lighters, and we don't want people to have to give up every single lighter, and it just doesn't represent that big of a threat.
Unless I walked on with 24 lighters, or if
or if you had a container. I mean, you could stick as many lighters as you want.
But lighter fluid.
Yeah. If it was over 3.4 ounces, you would not believe. And it is flammable, so it's an incendiary. You're not going to be able to do too much damage to an aircraft with an incendiary of that size.
Okay, we are about ready to embark on what I call the fascinating part of this conversation. But we are amazingly already at that halfway point of this hour.
Wow.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's live broadcast on KFUG 100.1. Oh my God, FM in Crescent City. I'm Jacques Kepner, and the host of Jacques Talks every Wednesday from 1 to 2 p.m. We talk with talented, unique characters that call our kingdom, magical kingdom home. If you're one of those people, a mover shaker, interesting artist, musician, business owner, etc., please reach out to me and let me know. And you may be on the booth right across from me here at the KFUG studio. It is Jacques Kepner. That's K-E-P as in Paul, N-E-R. Find and friend me, or look for me out on the town. Usually out on the dance floor on a Friday night. You'll usually see David there too.
That's right.
We'll hang out and have a beer. Okay, let's talk. You go to kfugradio.org to find out more. Now, here we are back on track with Fascinating Hour radio show here in the KFUG studio. And now we're going to pump it up a little bit with David. Garcia's in here with me, TSA guy, well-traveled, been a career guy with TSA, seen a lot of interesting stuff. So here we go on a bit of the twisted side of it. What's some of the most bizarre, strange things that you've ever encountered?
Yeah. Well, I need to consider being sensitive about the stuff. I'm American. I worked at international airports, and what may be weird to me is just pretty, normal as far as somebody from a different culture. But have you ever heard of Karzu Matsu? It's a cheese.
Okay.
And it's intentionally filled with maggots. So the first couple times I came up with that, and then it smells bad. So that was crazy. And other than that, weird subjectively, it just is something that is bizarre and strange to me as an individual, right? And so if somebody comes through and they're are part of a religion or a culture that I'm just not familiar with, or even like your typical New Age person who is just into things that I just am not, and I don't see very often.
Yeah.
So I mean, working at a large airport, you see it all. But if you're focused on the mission, you're not really paying attention to that stuff all that much because you're looking for the guns and the bombs that are going to threaten the property that belongs to the airline, but more importantly, the human lives. So, I mean, anything that you can imagine that people would carry in and carry on, I've seen it.
Where is the line drawn between smuggling and just carrying on something? Let's say, okay, let's bet you out on the marijuana. Federally, law says we're not supposed to be transporting marijuana? Yes, sir.
Right now, marijuana is Schedule 1 on the schedule, which means it doesn't have any, it's considered not to have any medicinal value and a high potential for abuse and addiction. And so that's currently the federal government's approach to it. We're federal, I work for a federal agency, so I know about the bureaucracy. So if it's going to change, it's going to change slowly. And but currently, that space, that footprint within the airport that is TSA is federal space, and so we have to conform to federal regulations regarding that.
What's your own opinion about the marijuana transporting, or do you, like, somebody comes up and you open up their travel and you see a couple of joints wrapped up in a pill bottle or something? Yeah. What's going to happen?
Well, officially, I have to follow the procedures and view it as being prohibited. Personally, if I was a cop and there was a robbery going on in town and I got called to come address a little piece of marijuana that was found, I might be a little frustrated by that. And so, I feel for that situation. And if time goes on and more states continue to legalize, the federal government, for obvious reasons, is going to have to give it consideration. Not that they're not already, and I understand that the current administration is looking at getting some recommendations and feedback about what they're going to do with regard to the scheduling. And so I anticipate going forward, we're going to be able to address the growing popularity of it. And so my opinion is pretty much sit back and wait, but obviously I can't use it. I can't even really associate with anybody in the industry and so on.
If I'm caught with suspicious white powder inside of that pill bottle, what do you do?
Yeah. Well, again, our mission statement is to detect threats to the aviation security system. And so we're not DEA. We're not looking for people's immigration status. That's what ICE does. And so we're focused on finding prohibited items. If I find something that is any type of suspected criminal or potential criminal activity, I'm required to report that. When it comes to white powder, how do I know it's not your dietary shake mix or something?
Right.
It depends on how it comes across, and if I can articulate my suspicion, I'll notify law enforcement, and I would have to refer to it as a white powder. I couldn't call it cocaine,
Right.
because I'm not trained to know what that looks like or smells like or anything. And so if it's suspected criminal activity, we're required
I had
to
one of the
report.
questions here was, do you have to follow policy and protocol in every case? So you're saying basically, yeah, if it's suspicious, you got to make a report on it, right?
Yes, but we're not looking for it.
Okay, you're not looking for it.
If we are conformed to the Fourth Amendment, what's called administrative search, we're allowed to perform these searches to look for prohibited items that could threaten transportation security. We don't look for drugs or anything other than
So you open a bag though, but it reeks of some real skunky marijuana. It's gonna be, you're just gonna let it kind of just go right through it.
Well, the question is, how do I know what marijuana smells like? Don't they have like CBD flower these days? That just
Yep, they
looks
sure
exactly-
do. That's same thing. Exactly.
So unless I'm looking for the potential threat and
Right.
I vicariously come across that, I'm not looking for
I
it.
wonder if that's regional, David. Is it because deep down the south in Atlanta, or
Yeah.
maybe in Savannah, Georgia,
Yeah.
or in Tupelo, Mississippi, you might get in a little trouble there. Because
Yeah.
what the hell is that? That sting.
Going back to why we're not armed agents.
Yeah. Tell me.
What down in San Francisco, California, what the laws are and what the culture sort of allows is going to be a lot different than, say, Jackson, Mississippi.
Right.
So if TSA is enforcing their standardized laws in every airport across the country, we might be stepping on the toes of some of our important law enforcement and community leader toes.
Gotcha.
So
Who makes the arrest in case of those? Let's say somebody really blew on it and they got. Wait a minute. Let's back it up. Why do you test fingers with a swab? Is that for gunpowder?
yeah, you mean we take a sample of people's hands?
That happens. Quite a
Yeah.
bit.
There was an incident that happened. It was called the Lockerbie attack, and I think it was 1988
It's
over
horrible,
Scotland.
horrible.
Some Libyan nationals blew up a plane, and what they used was explosives. So included in the Aviation Transportation Security Act, which came out in November 2011, that stood up TSA. In that, it said we need to have a focus on just detecting explosives. So we have explosive trace detection capability, and so we take samples of not just hands, but we take samples, and it gives us an idea that not that there's explosives there, but that there potentially could be.
Wow. Okay, that's cool. When does it become a serious offense that you would call the cops? It's got to be pretty like, wait a minute, you've got some stuff that could be determined as potentially turned into a bomb, or you're just going to grab those people immediately, and what leads up to that?
Yeah, the notification process ensues, and so it'd go to a supervisor who's going to make the determination of the level of risk. But if there are components of an explosive device in there, for sure law enforcement is going to be notified immediately. And so it's local law enforcement, or unless you're an airport at the size that warrants its own law enforcement on site, the law enforcement is going to be responsible for enforcing.
So if
arrests.
I go through there and I get I have a remember back in the day we'd put stash inside of a Kodak film container, right? This little plastic. If you had one of those kind of caught up in a body cavity and you pull it out and it looks just like a bunch of pot or something like that, I mean, you're going to have to kind of call the cops. They're trying to smuggle something on.
That's what's called, yes. It's called artful concealment.
Artful
Concealment. You're going out of your way to, put a knife in a jar of peanut butter, or, it's you're being artful about it. That all by itself is warrants further scrutiny as a potential high risk individual.
Okay, but truly they're looking for the people that are carrying a gun, carrying a weapon, carrying a explosive. That's what you're designed to see. And when I'm shocked at how often the complicated stuff that goes through my carry-on. I'll have my CPAP, thing. I'll have a recorder in there. I'll have all sorts of electrical equipment. I don't know, and it's all these wires wound up, and they just kind of goes through. It just kind of goes. I never really get stopped. Occasionally they'll look at something if they see a liquid in there, a bottle of water I put in there or something.
Yeah, or anything. If the electronics are tampered with, and within there it contains something that could look like the organic material that would resemble explosives.
Okay.
That would be a high risk type of situation.
Okay, let's turn this now to what I feel is the most fascinating part of this conversation. We've got about 20 minutes to go, so we could cover this in depth. But what are some of your, what are some of your qualifications? Because there has to be a certain amount of, quote, profiling, behavioral indicators that you encounter, as I said on my Facebook promo this morning, and on the text to so many of you that are listening today, saying that psychological behavior reader. You read people, do you not?
I'm trained to do that, and I ran a team in DFW in Seattle that were very large teams of what are called behavior detection and analysis officers.
And this encounter, this means you're reading people's you're studying people.
Correct.
Right? You're studying the way they look while they're standing in line.
That's correct.
They're coming up to you, and you're observing them, sometimes openly, sometimes a little covertly, or taking a look. What are you kind of looking for? Are you looking for just some twitchy, nervous, sweating?
Yeah. Basically, the common either biochemical or behaviors that represent signs of stress, fear, and deception. And then when we do conversations, anything that would, be verbal indications of deception. So we're basically doing real-time threat assessments on the spot. So we don't have intel that says, hey, look out for this guy. If we're going to have a real robust risk-based approach to security, we have to do vulnerability assessments and risk assessments. All of the equipment that's in the checkpoint, for the most part, is looking for the threat capability. Because under threat, you have threat capability, but you also have threat intent. So to have a real threat assessment that can really have the best risk-based security approach that's possible, you need to assess for capability and intent. So how do you assess for intent? That's what we do.
So is there any demographic, any age, anybody you're particularly looking for when is it tend to be men? Does it tend to be younger men? Okay, if you see somebody that you first kind of, that person's a little bit loud over there. Now, why would a person trying to smuggle or trying to do some evil malcontent, why would they be loud and attract attention? But what happens if you notice this person a little bit loud and you go, maybe that person looks intoxicated, maybe that person looks high. What do you do then? Okay.
If they are being loud, and everybody's being loud, you're working a checkpoint that's the Spirit Airlines flight to Las Vegas and everyone's in party mode, then they're not deviating from baseline that would make them stand out in the first place. But if everyone else is quiet and it's a time of day where you got families and business travelers, there's no reason for somebody to be running their mouth like that. That's just an indicator. And so if you assess an indicator, it gives you an opportunity to go up and have a conversation and engage. And somebody that has nefarious intent is going to have fear of discovery. So if a uniformed officer goes and approaches them and establishes a quick report and has a conversation, then additional behaviors might manifest that you can then identify. And if it's a cluster of behaviors and they reach a certain threshold, that warrants additional scrutiny because now they're potentially a high-risk passenger.
Wow, well said. So it could be just somebody that's had 2 or 3 shots just prior to coming into your area, where your screening area, and they're feeling no pain. What do you do with somebody that's kind of obviously drunk? Are you do you pull them off, or you talk to them? You say you got to sober up, you got to come back in a half hour, or are you going to just say you got to leave?
If somebody comes in and, like say feigns being drunk and they're intentionally causing a distraction, and so eyes go over here and the focus gets away from the person that's sneaking over in the corner, then that's potentially social engineering. But if somebody is bona fide drunk, that's really an airline issue. And so we'll go to the airline and say, hey, heads up, you probably, consider what this person might be like if they're at 30,000 feet on an aircraft. That's for them to deal with. We're focused on finding our guns and bombs. And when you work in a busy airport with the throughput that we would do, say like DFW or Seattle, you see all kinds. And people are afraid to fly. People are just nervous in general. People have destinations that they don't want to go to. Some people do have, objections to the frustrating processes that we implement as an agency. And so, you get all kinds of behavior. We do establish that baseline. And if people fall outside of that baseline, then we can approach them and see if we can assess more indicators that would result in additional scrutiny.
You and I are sitting right across the booth from each other. We're looking eye to eye as we talk. We're shaking our head. You're giving some fascinating information. But what happens when you have somebody that's going to be continuously looking down, looking away, seems a little bit nervous but quiet? Is that another indicator? What are some of the things that stand out? You would say, this person warrants some little deeper search?
Yeah. People are allowed to be shy, and but it is an indicator if it turns out you're not being forthcoming with our conversations, and it indicates a potential that you're not being honest. And so we want to resolve that. So if it turns out that, in my culture, we just don't make eye contact, and that comes out through the conversation I'm having with you, I have now resolved that. Yeah. But in the process of doing some additional scrutiny on maybe your person and your belongings, I'm going to be having this conversation with you. And if it determines that you don't have anything that would be a threat to that aircraft or the lives on board, then it's fine.
Okay, so I come in, I'm sweating profusely, openly sweating, and it's not that warm, and I'm not covering. Have no eye contact with you. I'm physically shaking a little bit. I'm shaking physically, and yet I have nothing in my baggage, nothing on my body. You might put me through this. There's the thing where you walk through when you raise your hands above your head and it spins around you, or you go through a metal detector. Those are the old-fashioned ways. Where do you go from then? When you're looking at somebody hard, do you just take them aside and do a pat down?
Yeah. If you're exhibiting high-risk behavior, you are now a high-risk passenger, so you get those extra countermeasures allocated to you. If we go through and search you and look through your bag and determines that you don't have any prohibited items, then you're just an interesting person that we discovered that day who had anomalous behavior outside of the baseline.
It's just
that we
kind of
expected.
A strange person.
And at some point we might notify law enforcement if they absolutely reach the high threshold of stress, fear, and deception behaviors.
So the red flags you're specifically looking for are what? If you could sum it up, what are some of the red flags that people exhibit that would make you, as a seasoned TSA, let's look at this person?
Like today, it's a rainy day in Crescent City. If you were to come to the airport this morning wearing sunglasses and shorts and flip-flops, you would stand outside of the baseline, which most people have hoodies. So that all by itself is an indicator. I'd go and talk to you. But it's just what you could imagine. Like, say you're afraid to do public speaking, and you're expected to do so. You're going to be shaking. You're going to be sweating. You're going to be fidgety. All those signs of nervousness. And for us, it's fear of discovery. And so I can't get in. It might sound like I'm being a little elusive here, but I literally can't describe verbatim and articulate exactly what each and every behavior are. So I got to be a little bit, beat around the bush a little bit.
Okay. How many arrests do you encounter, or how many times do you call the sheriff? Who do you call? How do you work with the Del Norte County police and the sheriff and the fire department?
Yeah, good question. I'm not the supervisor who makes those calls, but it's a county building, so the sheriff is the first call.
So they will come out, and it happens.
They may or may not.
Yeah. They may or may not come out. Are you going to hold on to that person, prevent them from flying, or the airlines will, most probably, if they've exhibited some weird.
We can't detain them. At some point, they have to make a decision if they want to go forward. We can resolve it to some extent with the police on the phone, but every airport that is federalized, or any airport that has commercial service, they are required to either have police on site or have a contract with the police where they will respond very quickly. But again, if they have priorities in the community, they just be given their staffing that day. You're
gonna hold them though if they've exhibited something. But I guess if they are showing that they have nothing on them, you've done a body search, body pat, all that kind of stuff, you're still gonna then I guess just ultimately let them go if the airline says okay they're good to go. You're just gonna let them go even if the I didn't say yes as though I agree with that. Yes.
Again, I'm not the supervisor, so I don't want to speak from my boss. But we would be making calls to our law enforcement liaison in Sacramento. We're a spoke of the Sacramento hub. We would be contacting our higher ups to make a bridge call and make those important calls.
Okay, what's the demographics? Are there more young men that are being detained and have been going through additional searches?
Mm-hmm.
Are there, with as many elderly people as we have in our community, we're a pretty white community too. So, I mean, are there demographics that are more people are being profiling?
Yeah.
Let's say, are you tending to be young men that are causing more problems than young women?
The word profile is a little like confiscated, but we enjoy the civil rights in this country, so we have to do screening irregardless of any of the protected classes, ethnicity, religion, gender, so on and so forth. So everybody gets equal scrutiny. Young people tend to be inexperienced flyers, and
young
there's
and
times,
dumb.
and you ask people to remove their electronics, and they don't put it together that their PlayStation console isn't electronic, and so young people, just because of the inexperience in life, they tend to get additional scrutiny just for those real honest mistakes. Older people, as we age, we may have a tendency to have metal implants in our hips and our knees, and so elderly people maybe have to go through some additional countermeasures because of that. But again, it's applied equally across the board, irregardless of anybody's.
Talk to me about, quote, secret shoppers. We have about 10 minutes left, so we're going to wind this down. But your secret shoppers, are there TSA agents that or officers that come in and test the vulnerability of, are they out there, and do they come through? Pretty much.
I mean, every time I fly, I get feedback. But yeah, any organization that wants to be continuously improving, and they want to set a standard of excellence, they want to be high performing, it behooves you to constantly test at the highest ends of your limitations, and constantly doing trial and error, see how you can improve. What kind of what are the limitations of this technology? What are the limitations of the process that they're implementing? What are the limitations of human beings? And so you're always out there testing, and if there is any room for improvement, you're trying to ascertain, was it the person, was it the technology, was it the processes, so that you're constantly getting better, because that's what the terrorists are doing. They're constantly trying to figure a way to frustrate and thwart our aviation security system. So we have to constantly test over and over and over and over. So when there is a failure, you might have, like say, a high performance Formula One car that wins a lot of races, but it fails to take corners at a certain speed. The testing is inherent with any organization that wants to continuously improve at a level of excellence.
Something you just said is interesting. So when you fly yourself, you are not announcing to anybody. You're waiting in line just like everybody else to go through the TSA line, unless you get a pre-check.
Yes.
And then you come through, the guy grabs gal, they really look at you. I'm shocked how much they really look. I got white hair. I got this head of white hair. It's like they look at my picture, like men up to me and over to, it's like, dude, that's me. Trust me, that's me. Looks just like me. So you have to go through that.
Yes.
And then are you encouraged afterwards to fill out are you check in on a website and say how your experience was?
Yeah, I encourage everybody. We want all feedback, critical or otherwise. And all those years in senior management that I spent with TSA, you're representing me outwardly to the American public and the taxpayer, who we have to provide value to. So if anybody has any room for improvement, or maybe needs some coaching to see how they can, build on their strengths and address areas that they can improve, I want to offer that to them. And so I'll find a way, for me, it's either speak to the supervisor directly, or most commonly I'll go to tsa.gov and leave some feedback there.
Interesting. So anybody can do that. You encourage the public to do that.
Absolutely. Good or bad.
Yeah, good or bad. Speaking, we just, Amanda came in here.
Speaking of good or bad?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm good. Good.
Yeah. At least it's an or.
Good or bad. But doggy's name again?
This is Brian.
Brian?
Yes.
Okay, Brian. Brian is a beautiful little Dutch. What do you call him?
Miniature Dachshund.
A miniature Dachshund. What kind of animals are allowed these days on planes? And do you take that up with is it a airline issue, or are you going to say, hey man, I don't tell the counter lady when I'm checking in, getting my boarding pass, man or woman, I don't tell them, hey, I have 2 box turtles in my little pouch here.
Yeah.
I just carried on, and then the TSA catches it. They always
Are you sending your turtles through X-ray?
One time I did.
Okay.
One time I did years ago, like 15 years ago. They yelled at me afterwards. Hey, what the hell?
Yeah.
Who's got?
That's animal abuse. Yeah.
Who put through a couple of box turtles?
Yeah, there's such a thing as a service horse, but mostly service animals are dogs, and so the airlines, for the most part, get to decide. And just for the sake of the comfort of everybody on board, if you in advance say, "Hey, I'm bringing my service dog," almost every single airline is going to allow you to do that and be in the cabin with you. With regard to the other animals, if they're not going to cause a distraction on board, and you can put them in a carry-on that's just the regular size of a carrier that would fit the overhead, you can really bring anything you want. But in some places like Florida, they come across exotic animals that are being smuggled.
This is right. Yes, birds, turtles.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a problem there.
Yes, there is.
Some of these ornate turtles. My turtles have been with me for many, 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 many years. And they're in brumation right now, which is a
and the animals that go under in the cargo hole, it's a pressurized cabin, but it's loud, and you can people that are breeders and so on, they put their animals in the underneath as if it's cargo. But as far as bringing it on board with you, it either fits in the container, like I imagine.
I've heard people sneaking on snakes. There's a story of a snake escaping in the airplane.
That's another issue. Yeah, you don't want to get it loose, right?
Yeah. I mean, I had a TSA said, what kind of container is that? I had them in a pack, really like a purse, a pink purse, and they said, what kind of a container is that? So it's a turtle tote. And I lifted it up, and I printed real carefully turtle totem.
Yeah.
So, okay, it's approved.
Well, so I take it these turtles don't live in water?
No, these are box turtles, American box turtles. Been around for years and years and years. Okay, well now we know enough about Kush and Sativa, the names of my turtles. So I also got to bring up, there has been some slap to TSA by some of the secret shoppers, people that have come in, and you've failed some tests. The reality is they've come through, they've been able to successfully bring on weapons and things that are clearly prohibited in the past. The last report I read was about 2018. Are you always trying to find new ways to thwart this? Because when your own secret shoppers come on.
Yeah.
Okay, before you answer that one, if someone does come on and they get caught, and do they come up to you, show their badge, saying, "I'm testing you"?
Yes.
I'm here. Does that happen? Has that happened to you?
Well, they will immediately go to the supervisor and say, "Yes, this is a test," because you'll call your supervisor when you discover it, or if you don't, they will go to the supervisor and announce themselves because they don't want to cause a distraction. But we have to keep in mind these tests are designed to be as difficult for a lot of times, as difficult as possible, to purposely test the limitations. And whether it's an emerging threat based on some intel, that tradecraft from a terrorist group or something like that, we don't ever really know. But they try to make them very, very difficult so that we can improve our technology or our processes or the capability through training of the officers. And so it's not as though you're taking 3 sticks of dynamite, taping an alarm clock to it, and putting it in a teddy bear, and then say, "Hey, let's see if it's their lucky day."
Right. Yeah.
It's very difficult. And you may have noticed since that report came out, I think you said 2018, that the technology's really improved and it's been disseminated, and it's based on these tests. So it's the continuous improvement is unfolding.
So the bad guys are out there, but fortunately, the bad guys make up a very, very small percentage. Like you said, 99% of the people are low risk, low. They're just folks like myself and yourself and other friends here that are traveling, and we want to get there as quickly as possible and just don't carry those big bottles of THC, CBD shampoos with as they're going to be caught. But they're out there, these bad guys. They are out there. They are scheming, per se. I mean, I hate to...
Yeah, there's a group called Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, and it was basically headed by, his name was Anwar al-Awlaki. He was an American citizen. But he was determined to be an enemy combatant or whatever designation they gave him, and he was taken out by a Hellfire missile in a drone strike. So you hear about, we killed an American citizen, it was controversial. It was, he was one of them. And Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, they see the economic generator that transportation is, and so it makes an attractive target. That group in particular, constantly talking about targeting transportation. They were involved in Boston Marathon bombing. They were involved in the underwear bombing. They were involved in the printer toner cartridge bombing, and it all is focused on transportation. And they recently came out with something reemphasizing their desire to attack transportation.
So you got to be on your toes.
Absolutely.
I can't think of anybody that I feel better about being a TSA officer than when I do. I travel. The doctor and I travel, and we see you, and we give you the nod. You always make Hey, send him to the screener again. Give him a pat down. No, you don't. You're really courteous. You're a real pro. Listen, we're out of time here. David Garcia, thank you so much incredibly for coming in and elucidating all these interesting things about what you've done in the past, what you're doing now, and the future of where you want to go. And congratulations, you do a great job with what you do.
I appreciate you. Thank you for having
And
me.
we'll see you at the Enoteca this Friday night.
I'll be at Porto tonight trying out the new maple pecan.
Okay, the Porta Pints. That's it. All right, folks, I think that's about it for me. I have 30 seconds. I just want to thank everybody in the KFUG Fugland here for tuning into Jacques Talks on KFUG 101.1 FM in Crescent City. I hope you've enjoyed the show. I certainly have, thanks to Paul Kritz, the manager here. And I'm going to turn this now over to Amanda, Doctor, on Squirrel Interrupted. I'm going to shut down just for a moment, and then we will take over from there. Thank you, folks. Peace and love to all of you. Reach out to me on Facebook, Jacques Kepner. Thank you again. Peace.